I never thought a basketball hoop would become my hill to die on. But here we are, standing in my driveway in Phoenix, Arizona, staring down the most insufferable woman I have ever had the misfortune of meeting. My name is Yates Crawford, and I moved into the Sunridge Estates community about 8 months ago with my wife Jennifer and our 2 kids, Mason and Lily. The neighborhood seemed perfect at first glance. Neat lawns, palm trees lining the streets, mountains visible in the distance, and families everywhere. What I didn't realize was that perfection came with a price, and that price was enforced by a woman named Barbara Hendricks, the president of our homeowners association. The troubles started on a Saturday morning in late March. I had just installed a portable basketball hoop at the end of our driveway. Nothing fancy, just a standard Spalding model with a black base that you fill with water. Mason was 13 and absolutely basketball obsessed, and Lily, at 10, was getting pretty good herself. I thought I was being a good dad, encouraging them to play outside instead of being glued to their screens all day. I was in the garage organizing some tools when I heard the sharp click of heels on pavement. I looked up to see Barbara marching toward me like she was leading a military invasion. She was probably in her mid-50s, with that specific haircut that screamed, "Let me speak to your manager," blonde highlights that were a little too blonde, and oversized sunglasses that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. "Excuse me," she called out, her voice dripping with fake politeness. "Are you aware that basketball hoops are strictly prohibited in Sunridge Estates?" I stood up, wiping my hands on my jeans. "I'm sorry, what?" "Basketball hoops," she repeated, pointing at my hoop like it was a decomposing animal. "They are not allowed. It's in the CC and Articles Section 12, Paragraph 4. All outdoor recreational equipment must be approved by the HOA board, and portable basketball hoops are expressly forbidden." I felt my jaw tighten. "Madam, with all due respect, it's just a basketball hoop. My kids want to play in the driveway." Barbara removed her sunglasses, revealing eyes that had probably never smiled genuinely in their entire existence. "The rules exist for a reason, Mr. Crawford. They maintain property values and community aesthetics. That hoop is an eyesore, and it needs to be removed within 48 hours or you'll receive a fine." "An eyesore? It's a basketball hoop, not a junkyard." 48 hours, she repeated, turning on her heel and walking away before I could respond. I stood there, stunned. Jennifer came out a moment later, having heard the entire exchange from the kitchen window. "Did that really just happen?" she asked. "Apparently, our kids aren't allowed to play basketball," I said, shaking my head. Jennifer sighed. "Maybe we should just put it in the backyard. The backyard has a pool and the patio furniture. There's no room for a basketball court back there." I looked at the hoop, then back at Barbara's retreating figure. "You know what? No, this is ridiculous." That evening, I dug out the HOA documents we had received when we bought the house. They were about 60 pages of dense legal text that I had only skimmed before signing. I found Section 12, Paragraph 4, and sure enough, there it was. Portable basketball hoops, trampolines, and similar recreational equipment are not permitted in front yards or driveways where visible from the street. I slammed the document down on the kitchen table. This is insane. Half the kids in this neighborhood probably want to play basketball. Jennifer was making dinner, stirring a pot of pasta sauce. "Maybe you could talk to the other board members. Barbara can't be making all the decisions alone." "That's actually a good idea," I said. The next day, Sunday, I did some research. The HOA board consisted of 5 members. Barbara Hendricks as president, a retired accountant named Gerald Thompson as treasurer, a woman named Susan Martinez as secretary, and 2 regular board members, David Chen and Patricia O'Neill. I managed to get David's phone number from a neighbor and gave him a call. David sounded exhausted when he answered. "Let me guess, Barbara sent you a violation notice. How did you know?" "Because she sends everyone violation notices. Look, Yates, I'm going to be honest with you. I've been trying to get off this board for a year, but nobody else will volunteer. Barbara runs everything like her own personal fiefdom. I've tried to push back, but I'm outvoted every time. So what am I supposed to do? My kids just want to play basketball." "You could come to the next board meeting. It's Tuesday night at 7 in the community center. Bring your case, and maybe if enough homeowners show up with complaints, we can actually make some changes." I thanked him and hung up, feeling slightly more hopeful. I spent the next 2 days talking to neighbors, and I was surprised to find out how many people had similar grievances with Barbara. Mrs. Kowalski, 3 houses down, had been fined for having the wrong shade of beige paint on her shutters. The Johnsons across the street got a violation for leaving their trash cans visible from the road for more than 2 hours after pickup. The Ray's family next door had been threatened with legal action because their front yard rocks weren't uniform enough. By Tuesday evening, I had convinced 8 families to come to the meeting with me. We walked into the community center together, a small show of solidarity. The meeting room was bland, with folding chairs arranged in rows facing a table where the board members sat. Barbara was in the center, naturally, looking irritated that so many people had shown up. "Good evening," she said curtly. "We have a full agenda tonight, so please hold all comments until the open forum at the end." We sat through 45 minutes of the most mind-numbing discussion I had ever witnessed. They debated the color of mulch for the community flower beds. They discussed whether the street sign at the corner of Mesquite and Desert Bloom needed repainting. They argued about the budget for next year's holiday decorations. Finally, we reached the open forum. I stood up first. "I'm Yates Crawford, lot 243. I recently installed a basketball hoop in my driveway so my children could play outside. Mrs. Hendricks informed me that this violates HOA rules and threatened me with fines. I'm here to request that the board reconsider this rule. Basketball hoops are harmless. They encourage children to be active, and frankly, I don't see how they negatively impact anyone." Barbara didn't even let me finish sitting down before she responded. "The rules are clearly stated in the CC and Articus that every homeowner agreed to upon purchase. If we make exceptions for you, we'll have to make exceptions for everyone, and before you know it, the neighborhood will look like a garage sale." "That's a ridiculous slippery slope argument," I said, standing back up. "A basketball hoop is not the same as turning your yard into a junkyard." Other homeowners started speaking up, voicing their own complaints about overly strict rules and excessive fines. Barbara's face grew redder with each comment. Finally, she slammed her hand on the table. "Order. If you don't like the rules, you're free to move somewhere else. These guidelines exist to protect everyone's investment." Meeting adjourned. She stood up and walked out, leaving the other 4 board members looking uncomfortable. David caught my eye and shrugged apologetically. I drove home furious. Jennifer was waiting up for me. "How did it go?" she asked. "About as well as you'd expect. Barbara basically told everyone to shut up or move." "So what are you going to do?" I thought about it for a long moment. "I'm going to take the hoop down." Jennifer looked surprised. "Really?" "Yeah, and then I'm going to put up a better one." She raised an eyebrow. "I feel like there's more to this plan." "Oh, there definitely is." The next morning, I removed the portable hoop from my driveway. I saw Barbara drive by slowly, a satisfied smile on her face. She had won, or so she thought. I spent the next week doing research. I read through every single page of the HOA documents, looking for loopholes, inconsistencies, anything I could use. And I found something interesting. The rule about basketball hoops specifically mentioned portable equipment. It said nothing about permanent installations. I called a contractor and got quotes for installing an in-ground basketball hoop system. The good ones weren't cheap, but I was motivated. I went with a top-of-the-line model, a tempered glass backboard, a professional-grade breakaway rim, and a pole that was anchored in concrete. But here's where it got interesting. I also ordered a lighting system, professional court lights that could illuminate the entire driveway for night games. Jennifer was worried about the cost, but I assured her it was worth it. Besides, I said, this will actually increase our property value. A professional basketball court is a desirable feature. The installation took 2 days. The contractors dug a deep hole for the pole, poured concrete, let it set, and then assembled the entire system. The backboard was pristine and regulation-sized. The lights were mounted on poles on either side of the driveway, with motion sensors and timer controls. Mason and Lily were ecstatic. The evening the installation was complete, we had our first night game. I flipped on the lights, and our driveway was illuminated like a professional arena. The kids played for hours and several neighbor kids joined in. It was perfect. Barbara appeared the next morning. I was expecting her. "What?" she said, her voice shaking with rage. "Is that?" "That," I said calmly, "is a permanent basketball installation with professional lighting." Since the HOA rules only prohibit portable equipment, I decided to invest in something more substantial. Her face went through several shades of red. "This is completely unacceptable. The lights are a nuisance. The noise is disruptive. I will have this removed." "Actually, you won't." I checked the local ordinances. The lights comply with all brightness and direction regulations. They're pointed downwards so they don't shine into anyone's windows. And as for noise, children playing outside during reasonable hours is perfectly legal. In fact, Arizona has specific laws protecting children's right to play. "We'll see about that," she hissed, storming off. 2 days later, I received a certified letter from the HOA. It was a violation notice claiming that my basketball installation violated multiple sections of the CC and Artiques, along with a fine of $500, and a demand that I remove the structure within 30 days or face additional penalties of $100 per day. I had been expecting this too. I took the letter to a lawyer who specialized in HOA disputes. Her name was Rachel Goldstein, and she had a reputation for eating HOA boards for breakfast. Rachel read through the letter and the relevant HOA documents. "They don't have a case," she said simply. "The rule clearly specifies portable equipment. Your installation is permanent. They're reaching. So what do? You write a response letter refusing to comply and citing the specific language in their own rules. I'll draft it for you, and you keep documenting everything. Every interaction with Barbara, every letter, every fine. If this escalates, we'll need a paper trail." I followed her advice. The response letter was polite but firm, pointing out that my basketball court was fully compliant with both HOA rules and local ordinances. I sent it certified mail and kept a copy for my records. Barbara did not take it well. Over the next few weeks, she drove by my house multiple times a day. She took photos of the basketball court from every angle. She even came onto my property once when I wasn't home, until Jennifer told her she was trespassing and needed to leave. The harassment escalated. I started receiving violation notices for increasingly absurd things. My grass was allegedly a 1/4 inch too tall. My mailbox was supposedly the wrong shade of black. There was a tiny oil spot on my driveway that was supposedly a hazard. Each violation came with a fine. I documented everything and sent it all to Rachel. "This is harassment," she said, "and it's actually helping your case. She's clearly targeting you." Meanwhile, something interesting was happening in the neighborhood. Other families started pushing back against Barbara's tyrannical rule. Mrs. Kowalski repainted her shutters in an even brighter shade of beige out of spite. The Johnsons left their trash cans out for an extra day just to annoy her. The Ray's family added even more non-uniform rocks to their yard. My basketball court had become a symbol of resistance, and every evening, kids from all over the neighborhood gathered in my driveway for games under the lights. Barbara called the police 3 times, claiming that the noise was a disturbance. Each time the officers showed up, saw kids playing basketball, and left without doing anything. On the 3rd call, one officer told me privately that Barbara was wasting their time and that they wouldn't be responding to her calls about basketball anymore unless there was an actual crime being committed. In late April, I received another letter from the HOA. This one was more serious. It stated that I was in continued violation of community standards, and that the board had voted to place a lien on my property for unpaid fines, which now totaled over $3,000 with all the bogus violations Barbara had been sending. I immediately called Rachel. "Can they do that?" "They can try," she said. "But here's the thing. Any lien has to be legitimate. If we can prove that these fines are retaliatory and baseless, we can get them thrown out, and we might have grounds for a lawsuit against the HOA for harassment." "I want to fight this," I said. "I'm tired of backing down." "Good," Rachel said, "because I think we can win." She filed a motion in Maricopa County Superior Court to have the lien removed and included a countersuit against the HOA for harassment, abuse of power, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The filing made it clear that we had documentation of everything. Every violation notice, every fine, every interaction with Barbara, and testimony from multiple neighbors about her pattern of targeting anyone who disagreed with her. The HOA's lawyer, a man named Richard Sullivan, tried to get the case dismissed, but the judge refused. We were going to court. In the weeks leading up to the trial, more and more neighbors came forward with their own stories about Barbara. It turned out she had a long history of abusing her power as HOA president. One family had been forced to remove a vegetable garden because Barbara claimed it wasn't aesthetically pleasing. Another had been fined repeatedly for having a truck parked in their driveway because Barbara thought trucks were lower class. The more we dug, the worse it got. David Chen, the board member who had been sympathetic from the start, finally resigned in protest and agreed to testify on our behalf. He brought copies of internal HOA emails that showed Barbara had been acting without board approval on many of her decisions, and had been using HOA funds for personal expenses, including charging expensive lunches and a weekend trip to Sedona to the HOA budget under the guise of professional development. The trial took place in mid-June. The courtroom was surprisingly full, with at least 20 families from Sunridge Estates showing up to watch. Barbara sat at the defendant's table with Richard Sullivan, looking defiant. Rachel presented our case methodically. She showed the judge the HOA's own rules and how my basketball court was fully compliant. She presented documentation of every violation notice I had received and demonstrated how they escalated immediately after I refused to remove the basketball hoop. She called neighbors to testify about Barbara's pattern of harassment and abuse of power. David Chen testified about the financial irregularities, and Barbara's habit of making decisions without consulting the rest of the board. Richard Sullivan tried to argue that Barbara was simply enforcing the rules, and that I was a troublemaker who refused to follow community guidelines. But when Rachel Cross examined Barbara, things fell apart quickly. "Mrs. Hendricks," Rachel said, "can you explain why Mr. Crawford received a violation notice for grass that was allegedly too tall when photos from that same day show that his grass was the same height as every other lawn on his street?" "I have standards," Barbara said stiffly. "Can you explain why you charged a $300 dinner at a steakhouse to the HOA budget?" "That was a board meeting." "A board meeting where no other board members were present, and where the credit card receipt shows you ordered 3 cocktails." Barbara had no good answer for that. Rachel continued dismantling her credibility piece by piece. By the time she was done, Barbara looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. The judge deliberated for less than an hour before returning with a decision. He removed all fines against me, calling them clearly retaliatory and without merit. He ordered the HOA to pay my legal fees, which were substantial. And then he did something I wasn't expecting. He ordered a full audit of the HOA's finances and temporarily removed Barbara from her position as president pending the results of that audit. Barbara stood up, her face pale. "This is ridiculous. I've dedicated years to this community." "You've abused your position for personal gain," the judge said. "And if the audit reveals criminal misappropriation of funds, this matter will be referred to the district attorney's office." We left the courtroom victorious. Neighbors congratulated me in the hallway. Jennifer hugged me tight. Mason and Lily, who had come to watch the verdict, were thrilled. But the story didn't end there. The financial audit took about 6 weeks, and when the results came back, they were damning. Barbara had been systematically stealing from the HOA for over 3 years. She had charged personal expenses to the HOA account, inflated vendor invoices and pocketed the difference, and even paid herself an unauthorized salary as president. In total, she had embezzled nearly $70,000. The HOA board held an emergency meeting and voted unanimously to remove Barbara permanently and to refer the matter to law enforcement. In late August, Barbara Hendricks was arrested and charged with embezzlement, fraud, and abuse of fiduciary duty. The charges were felonies, and she was looking at serious prison time. Her arrest made the local news. Reporters showed up in our neighborhood, interviewing residents about the tyrannical HOA president who had been stealing from her neighbors. I gave a brief statement about the basketball hoop incident and how it had led to uncovering her crimes. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. If she had just let my kids play basketball, none of this would have come to light. Barbara's trial took place the following spring. The evidence against her was overwhelming, and her lawyer eventually negotiated a plea deal. She pleaded guilty to multiple counts of embezzlement and fraud. The judge sentenced her to 4 years in state prison and ordered her to pay full restitution to the HOA, plus additional penalties. In the aftermath, the Sunridge Estates HOA went through a complete overhaul. The board was expanded to 7 members to prevent any one person from having too much power. The CC and Articus were revised, with input from homeowners, to eliminate overly restrictive and ridiculous rules. Basketball hoops, both portable and permanent, were officially allowed. Vegetable gardens were permitted. The paint color restrictions were loosened significantly. David Chen agreed to serve as interim president and did an excellent job restoring trust in the HOA. Under his leadership, the community became what it should have been all along: a place where families could live comfortably without fear of arbitrary rules and harassment. My basketball court became legendary in the neighborhood. We hosted informal tournaments on summer evenings, with families bringing snacks and drinks and cheering on their kids. The lights turned my driveway into a gathering place, a spot where community actually meant something. One evening in October, about a year after the whole ordeal began, I was shooting hoops with Mason while Lily practiced her dribbling. Jennifer came out with lemonade for everyone. Neighbor kids were arriving for that night's game. The sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Mason made a three-pointer and grinned. "Dad, I'm really glad you didn't take down the hoop." "Me too, buddy," I said. "Me too." Jennifer put her arm around my waist. "You know, when we moved here, I never imagined we'd end up taking down a corrupt HOA president over a basketball hoop." "Life's funny that way," I said. Mrs. Kowalski walked over from her house, carrying a plate of cookies. "Evening, everyone." Thought the kids might want a snack before the big game. The Johnsons arrived with their 3 kids. The Ray's family came over. Even some families from other streets in the neighborhood showed up. My driveway was packed with people, all of them laughing and talking and enjoying a beautiful Arizona evening. I looked around at the community we had built, not because of the HOA but despite it, and I felt a profound sense of satisfaction. Sometimes you have to fight for what's right, even when it's something as simple as a basketball hoop. Sometimes you have to stand up to bullies, even when they hide behind rules and regulations. And sometimes when you do that, you discover that you're not alone. There are others who feel the same way, who are tired of being pushed around, who are ready to push back. The lights clicked on automatically as dusk fell, illuminating the court in bright, clear light. The kids chose teams and started their game. Adults stood around the perimeter, cheering and chatting. It was exactly what I had envisioned when I first bought that portable hoop all those months ago. My kids playing basketball, being active, having fun, surrounded by friends and neighbors. The legal fees had been substantial, even with the HOA covering most of them. The upgraded basketball system wasn't cheap. But standing there that evening, watching my community come together, I knew it had been worth every penny. Some things are worth fighting for: family, community. The right to live your life without someone else's arbitrary rules crushing your spirit. Barbara Hendricks was in prison, where she belonged. The HOA was functioning properly under reasonable leadership, and my kids had a basketball court that was the envy of every child in Sunridge Estates. I grabbed a basketball and took a shot. It swished through the net perfectly. Mason cheered. Lily ran to get the rebound. Jennifer smiled at me with that look that said she was proud of me, proud of us, proud of what we had accomplished together. Life in Sunridge Estates continued on, but it was different now. Better. People felt empowered to speak up when something wasn't right. The HOA board actually listened to residents instead of dictating to them. Neighborhood gatherings became regular events, not just basketball games but block parties, holiday celebrations, and community cleanup days. I even joined the HOA board myself, figuring that if I was going to complain about how things were run, I should be willing to help run them properly. It was boring sometimes, dealing with budgets and maintenance schedules, but it was important work. And unlike Barbara, I actually cared about making the community better for everyone, not just enforcing my personal preferences. The basketball court lights became a symbol of something larger. When they were on, it meant the community was alive, active, together. Kids knew they could come over for a game. Adults knew they could stop by and socialize. It was a beacon, literally and figuratively, of what a neighborhood should be. One Saturday afternoon in November, I was cleaning out the garage when a car pulled up. A young couple got out, looking around the neighborhood with the eager expressions of potential home buyers. Their realtor, a woman I recognized from around the community, was showing them houses. They walked up to me. "Excuse me," the man said. "We're thinking about buying in this neighborhood. Can I ask you how you like living here?" I smiled. "I love it. It's a great community." "What about the HOA?" the woman asked. "We've heard horror stories about HOAs in Phoenix." "We had some issues about a year ago," I said honestly. "But they've been resolved. The current board is reasonable and actually listens to residents. It's night and day compared to before." The man noticed the basketball court. "Wow, that's an amazing setup. Did you have to get special approval for that?" "It's a long story," I said, laughing. "But the short version is that the HOA rules allow permanent basketball installations, and I took full advantage of that. If your kids play basketball, this is a great neighborhood for it." They thanked me and moved on. I watched them go, feeling good about the neighborhood I could now honestly recommend. That wouldn't have been possible a year ago. The holidays came and went. Mason's basketball skills improved dramatically with all the practice, and he made his middle school team. Lily was getting taller and more coordinated, already talking about trying out for her school team in a couple of years. Jennifer started a book club that met in our backyard once a month. I organized a neighborhood watch program that actually focused on safety rather than nitpicking over lawn care. In February, almost exactly a year after I had first installed that portable basketball hoop, David Chen announced he was stepping down as HOA president. He had done an excellent job stabilizing things, but he wanted to focus more on his retirement and spending time with his grandchildren. The board held elections, and to my surprise, several people nominated me. I won by a comfortable margin. Standing up to Barbara had apparently earned me a lot of respect in the community. People knew I would fight for what was right and wouldn't abuse the position. My first act as president was to officially rename the community center meeting room. We called it the Community Voice Room, a reminder that the HOA existed to serve the residents, not the other way around. We also established clear guidelines for board conduct, financial transparency, and homeowner input on major decisions. The changes weren't dramatic or revolutionary. They were simple, common-sense reforms that should have been in place all along. But they made a huge difference in how people felt about living in Sunridge Estates. One evening in March, I was sitting on my front porch, enjoying the pleasant weather. The basketball court was in use, as it was most evenings. I could hear the rhythmic bounce of the ball, the squeak of shoes on concrete, the laughter and friendly trash talk of kids playing a game they loved. A car drove slowly past, and I recognized Barbara's husband, Tom, behind the wheel. He had divorced Barbara shortly after her arrest, and I hadn't seen him around much since then. He stopped in front of my house and rolled down his window. "Yates," he said, his voice tired. "Tom," I replied, standing up and walking to the curb. He looked at the basketball court, then back at me. "I owe you an apology. I knew Barbara was out of control, but I never imagined she was stealing. I should have said something sooner." "It's not your fault," I said. "She fooled a lot of people," he nodded slowly. "That basketball hoop, though, that's what started everything. If you hadn't fought back, who knows how long she would have kept getting away with it." "I just wanted my kids to play basketball," I said simply. Tom smiled sadly. "You're a good man, Yates. Take care of yourself." He drove away, and I stood there for a moment, thinking about everything that had happened. It was strange how something so simple had snowballed into such a significant event. A basketball hoop, that's all it had been. But it had represented something larger. The right to live your life without unreasonable interference, the courage to stand up against injustice, the power of community when people come together. I walked back to the porch and sat down. Jennifer came out and joined me, handing me a cold beer. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "Just reflecting on how crazy this past year has been." "Crazy good or crazy bad?" "Both," I said, "but mostly good. We've got a great community now, the kids are happy, and we have the best damn basketball court in Phoenix," she laughed. "That we do." We sat there in comfortable silence, watching the sun set and listening to the sounds of children playing. It was everything I had wanted when we moved to Sunridge Estates, and it had taken a fight to get it, but it was worth it. The months continued to pass. Summer arrived with its brutal heat, but even that didn't stop the evening basketball games. We installed misters around the court to help cool things down, and someone donated a water cooler that was always kept full. The games went on, sometimes until 10 or 11 at night, with parents supervising and everyone having a great time. In August, we got word that Barbara had been released early for good behavior after serving just over a year of her sentence. She moved out of state immediately, apparently to live with family in Ohio. I felt a momentary pang of something, not quite sympathy, but maybe acknowledgement that her life had been completely upended. But then I remembered all the families she had harassed, all the money she had stolen, all the misery she had caused, and that feeling disappeared. She had made her choices, and she had paid the consequences. The Sunridge Estates HOA continued to thrive under proper leadership. We completed several successful projects, renovating the community pool, updating the playground equipment, and even installing solar panels on the community center to reduce our energy costs. The budget was healthy, financial reports were published monthly for all residents to review, and board meetings were well attended and productive. My basketball court remained the heart of the neighborhood. We had hosted 3 formal tournaments, countless pickup games, and even a charity 3-on-3 competition that raised money for a local youth sports program. The lights were professionally maintained, and had become such a fixture that when the power went out during a monsoon storm, people joked that they couldn't see anything because the basketball court lights weren't on. Mason was now 14 and playing varsity basketball as a freshman, an impressive accomplishment. Several college scouts had already expressed interest in watching him play over the next few years. He credited the countless hours of practice in our driveway for his improvement. Lily, now 11, had made her school team as well and was developing into a formidable point guard. One evening in October, we held a neighborhood block party to celebrate the 2-year anniversary of Barbara's removal and the formation of the new HOA board. It was a potluck affair with grills going, music playing, and people everywhere. The basketball court was set up with tables of food rather than used for games, though several kids kept trying to squeeze in shots between the adults. David Chen gave a short speech thanking everyone for their patience during the transition period and praising the community for coming together. Then he surprised me by calling me up to say a few words. I hadn't prepared anything, so I spoke from the heart. 2 years ago, I just wanted my kids to have a place to play basketball. I never imagined it would lead to everything that happened. But I learned something important through all of it. Community matters. Standing up for what's right matters. And sometimes, the smallest things can make the biggest difference. Thank you all for supporting my family and for making Sunridge Estates a real community, not just a collection of houses. People applauded, and I stepped down, feeling slightly embarrassed but also proud. Jennifer hugged me, and the kids rolled their eyes in that affectionate way that teenagers do when their parents are being sentimental. The party went late into the night. People lingered, not wanting the evening to end. The basketball court lights were on, casting their familiar glow over everything. Someone brought out a guitar, and an impromptu sing-along started. Kids played tag in the street. Adults talked and laughed and enjoyed being part of something good. Around midnight, as things were finally winding down, I found myself standing at the free throw line, basketball in hand. The court was empty, the tables had been cleared away, and most people had gone home. Jennifer and the kids had already gone inside. I took a shot. It bounced off the rim. I grabbed the rebound and tried again. Swish. I stood there for a moment, just me and the court and the lights, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. A basketball hoop. That's what had started it all. Barbara had wanted it gone, had tried to force me to remove it, had threatened and fined and harassed. And in response, I had put up a bigger one with lights for night games. It had been an act of defiance, but it had also been an act of hope. Hope that things could be better. Hope that standing up to bullies was worth it. Hope that community could triumph over tyranny, and it had. We had won. Not just the legal battle, but the larger war for the soul of our neighborhood. Sunridge Estates was now what it should have always been. A place where families could live and thrive without fear, where kids could play basketball under the lights, where community meant something real. I took one more shot. It arced through the air and dropped cleanly through the net. Perfect. I turned off the lights and headed inside, ready for whatever came next. The story of the basketball hoop became something of a legend in our part of Phoenix. Other neighborhoods dealing with tyrannical HOAs would reach out to me for advice. I always told them the same thing. Document everything, know your rights, and don't be afraid to fight back when you're in the right. Rachel Goldstein, the lawyer who had represented me, saw a huge increase in HOA-related cases after our victory. She told me once that our case had inspired dozens of homeowners to stand up to abusive boards. Some cases settled quickly once the HOAs realized they couldn't bully people anymore. Others went to court and won. The ripple effect was significant. In our own community, life settled into a comfortable rhythm. The HOA handled necessary business without micromanaging residents' lives. Property values actually increased, despite Barbara's predictions that my basketball court would destroy everyone's investments. Turns out that a healthy, active community with happy residents is more attractive to buyers than a sterile neighborhood ruled by fear. I served as HOA president for 2 years before deciding not to run for re-election. I had accomplished what I set out to do: restore sanity and fairness to our community leadership. A wonderful woman named Patricia Singh, a civil engineer with 3 kids of her own, took over and continued the positive momentum. Mason got a full scholarship to play basketball at Arizona State University. During his signing ceremony, he thanked his parents for installing that basketball court and giving him a place to develop his skills. I tried not to cry but failed miserably. Lily was already being recruited by high schools with strong basketball programs, and she was only in 8th grade. The basketball court remained as popular as ever. It needed occasional maintenance, new nets, some touch-up paint on the court surface, but the structure itself was solid. Those professional-grade components I had invested in were worth every penny. The lights still worked perfectly, illuminating countless games and gatherings. Sometimes, when I was out there alone, I would think about that first morning when Barbara had marched up my driveway and demanded I remove a simple basketball hoop. I would think about how angry I had been, how unfair it had all seemed, and how close I had come to just giving up and complying. But I hadn't given up. I had fought back, and in doing so, I had helped transform an entire community. Jennifer and I often talked about how different our lives might have been if I had just quietly removed that first hoop. We probably would have been fine, but we wouldn't have been happy. We would have been living under the constant threat of Barbara's capricious enforcement of arbitrary rules. We would have been part of a community based on fear rather than cooperation. Instead, we were part of something real, something good, something worth fighting for. The basketball court lights still come on every evening as the sun sets behind the mountains. Kids still gather to play. Adults still socialize and watch. The sound of the ball bouncing, the swish of the net, the laughter and competition, all of it continues, night after night, a testament to what can happen when someone decides that enough is enough and refuses to back down. I never set out to be a neighborhood hero or to take down a corrupt HOA president. I just wanted my kids to play basketball. But sometimes life takes you in unexpected directions, and if you're willing to stand up for what's right, you might just make a difference that extends far beyond your own driveway. The basketball court is still there. The lights still shine. And every time I see them, I remember what they represent: freedom, community, and the simple but profound idea that sometimes the smallest acts of resistance can lead to the biggest changes. Barbara Hendricks wanted my hoop gone, so I put up a bigger one with lights for night games. And in doing so, I helped save a community and taught my children that standing up to bullies is always worth it, no matter how powerful they seem. Years from now, when Mason and Lily have children of their own, I hope they tell them this story. Not to glorify the fight, but to teach them that fairness matters, that rules should make sense and serve the community, and that sometimes you have to be willing to make a stand. The basketball court will probably still be there, still hosting games, still bringing people together. A permanent reminder that good can triumph over petty tyranny if you're willing to fight for it. That's the story of how a basketball hoop brought down an HOA dictator and transformed a neighborhood. It's my story, but in a way, it belongs to everyone in Sunridge Estates. We lived through it together, fought together, and built something better together. And all of it started with a simple wish: that my kids should be able to play basketball in their own driveway. The lights shine on, every evening without fail, a beacon of hope and community. And somewhere in a prison cell and then in a different state far away, Barbara Hendricks knows that she lost. She tried to control everything and everyone, and in the end, she lost it all. Meanwhile, in Sunridge Estates, families thrive, children play, and life goes on, better than ever before. That's what victory looks like. Not dramatic or flashy, but real and lasting. A basketball court with lights and a community that learned to stand up for itself. Simple, beautiful, and worth every moment of the fight it took to get here.